Black woman saves a stranger. When no one helps. Unaware he's a black billionaire. Someone help him! Please! Rain slammed against the pavement like war drums as Amara Fields dropped to her knees beside the unconscious man sprawled near the gutter. Cars honked. People passed. No one stopped. Her voice cracked, frantic, her soaked curly hair clinging to her face. The man wasn't moving. His clothes were shredded and damp, a threadbare hoodie clinging to his thin frame. One eye looked bruised shut. His lips trembled, but he made no sound.
"Sir? Hey, can you hear me?"
He gave the faintest nod, more reflex than awareness. Amara turned, eyes blazing at the crowd gathering just far enough to do nothing. "Y'all just gonna watch? He's dying!" No response. She slipped off her tan trench coat and covered him, shielding him from the downpour. Her hands, shaking from adrenaline and cold, reached for her phone. The call to 911 was brief. Just as she hung up, a cafe worker emerged from the door behind her. "Ma'am, you can't have him here. You'll scare away customers." Amara stood slowly, eyes locked. "I'll buy you damn coffee. But he's coming in." 10 minutes later, they were inside. Amara had moved him to a back corner table, away from the windows. Steam drifted from the coffee and bowl of chicken noodle soup she'd ordered. She offered the spoon, but the man gently waved her away. He tried to speak. She leaned closer.
I didn't ask for this."
"You didn't have to," Amara replied softly.
"You're human."
"That's enough." He looked at her. Really looked. A flicker of something ancient passed through his gaze. Pain. Gratitude? Regret? "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Walter." "Okay, Walter. I'm Amara. I'm staying with you until help gets here." He flinched. No hospital." "I already called the ambulance. They'll just check you out, okay? You're freezing and—" His eyes grew wide, and he reached to grab her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospital." Amara paused. Something about the fear in his voice wasn't just paranoia. It was lived. Deep. Earned. She didn't pry. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out a spare pair of dry socks she carried for emergencies. "Then we wait. Together." He loosened his grip, and for a brief second his eyes shimmered. "Thank you," he whispered. 30 minutes later, the paramedics arrived. Walter refused to give them any ID, any address, or even a last name. Just a soft-spoken no to everything. But he allowed them to check his vitals. Bruised ribs. Dehydrated, mild hypothermia. The EMTs warned that they couldn't force treatment. Eventually, with a firm yet respectful nod to Amara, they left him in her care. When she turned back, Walter was gone. Only a note remained, folded precisely in half and placed beside the untouched soup bowl. "Thank you. I won't forget this." The handwriting was cursive, refined, and the paper smelled faintly of leather and old books. Amara blinked. "Who writes like this anymore?" she whispered, folding the note and tucking it into her journal. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her small one-bedroom apartment in South Shore, going over every detail. The bruises didn't match the typical street fight. His hands weren't calloused. No signs of labor. His speech, though faint, was articulate, measured. His eyes had that presence. Not military. Not homeless either. Something else. She Googled missing persons. Searched Walter Chicago. Nothing. Across the city, on the top floor of a glass high-rise downtown, Walter Reed stood shirtless in front of a massive mirror. a bandage wrapped around his ribs. His assistant, Miles Thornton, hovered nearby, disapproving. "You could have died out there. You really think this crusade is worth all that?" Walter's voice was calm, low. "She helped when no one else did. You let her see you. That's a risk. She saw who I wanted her to see. You're a billionaire, Walter. The public thinks you vanished 5 years ago for good reason." He turned, his eyes tired. "And maybe they were right. But she reminded me why I started all this." Miles sighed. "What now?" "We watch. We follow her, quietly. I want to know everything about Amara Fields." Miles frowned. "You planning on thanking her or stalking her?" Walter's lips twitched. "Eventually, both." He turned away, staring out at the storm still raging across the Chicago skyline. "She doesn't know it yet, but she saved more than just a stranger." 3 days had passed since the storm. Amara sat behind the counter at Fields Pages, her tiny bookstore nestled between a barber shop and a laundromat on Chicago's South Shore. She stared at the front door, as if expecting the man she called Walter to walk in and finish his soup. But he never did. "Earth to Amara," said her best friend, Kendra, waving a hand. "Girl, you've been spacing out since Tuesday." Amara blinked. "Sorry." "Just thinking. You still stuck on that guy? You barely knew him." "I knew enough," Amara said. "He was in trouble, scared out of his mind, and no one lifted a damn finger." "It wasn't just about him. It's about us." Kendra gave her a look. "You always gotta make everything a cause." Amara leaned forward, her voice low. "He wasn't just anybody. The way he looked at me, like he was used to people pretending not to see him. But he also had this presence. Calm, measured, like he's been through something real." Kendra raised an eyebrow. "You think he's a spy?" "I don't know what he is, but something doesn't add up." Outside the shop, a sleek black car parked across the street. Tinted windows. A man in a tailored grey coat stepped out, glanced at the bookstore, then walked off without entering. Amara didn't notice. But someone was watching. Later that night, Amara's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in her gut told her to pick up. "Hello?" A long silence. "Miss Fields?" A man's voice said, low and calm. "Yes?" "Who is this?" "You helped someone this week, a man in trouble." She froze. "Who is this?" "I'm calling on behalf of him." "He's grateful." "You're calling on behalf of someone who can't say thank you himself?" The man hesitated. "He doesn't want to complicate your life, but he's been keeping an eye on you. For your safety." "My safety? From what?" Click. The line went dead. Amara stared at her phone. Her heart thudded. She quickly turned off the shop lights, locked the door, and peeked through the blinds. There was no one outside. The next morning, a package sat on the bookstore's doorstep. No return address. Wrapped in matte black paper, inside was a first edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God, flawless condition, with a simple note tucked inside. "You give more than books." She stared at it, stunned, stared at it. The book was worth thousands. Kendra gasped. "He rich or something?" Amara shrugged, but her mind raced. She remembered the way he refused the ambulance, the way he moved, controlled, precise, like someone trained. And now, a book like this. Who the hell was Walter? Across town, Walter Reed sat in his penthouse office, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows and art that could fund a small country. His assistant, Miles, laid down a thick file. She graduated from Howard, opened that bookstore 4 years ago with a grant, volunteers on Saturdays with literacy programs. Lives Alone keeps her circle tight. Walter nodded. She's not just kind. She's principled. Miles gave him a skeptical look. You think you owe her something? I know I do. So tell her. Walter stared out the window. Not yet. If I show her who I am now, it'll change everything. Maybe that's what she deserves. Walter's voice dropped. What she deserves is peace. And I destroy peace. That night, Amara attended her monthly community board meeting at the South Shore Center. It was supposed to be routine, zoning changes, public safety complaints, local petitions. But tonight, it turned hostile. I'm sorry, said Councilman Briggs, but the proposal to tear down the vacant lot next to Fields Pages for a luxury condo has already passed the zoning board. Amara shot up from her chair. That lot belongs to our block. You didn't post the notice. Briggs smirked. We followed protocol. No, you snuck it through hoping no one would notice, people murmured. The air in the room tightened. Briggs shrugged. It's already a done deal. After the meeting, Briggs cornered her outside. You're making noise, Amara. You might want to remember how fast people like you can be replaced. She stared at him, stunned. Did you just threaten me? He leaned in, breath sour with whiskey. I'm saying this isn't your fight. Amara didn't flinch. Then you picked the wrong woman to start it with. Meanwhile, Walter watched from a distance. He'd arrived just minutes before, standing in shadow near the edge of the center's parking lot. He watched Amara, eyes narrowed as Briggs spoke to her with veiled aggression. She's got a fire, Miles whispered beside him. She's going to need it, Walter replied. His jaw clenched. Briggs had no idea who he'd just cornered, or who was quietly standing in the dark, ready to burn down his plans. It was nearly midnight when Amara jolted awake to the sound of glass shattering. Her bookstore's front window. She grabbed her phone and peered through the curtain from her apartment above the shop. A group of teenagers in hoodies were sprinting down the street, their laughter echoing in the night. Spray paint stained the brick wall. Out with rats. Her heart dropped. By the time police arrived, they were uninterested. Could be random, one officer shrugged, shining his flashlight lazily. Amara clenched her jaw. This wasn't random. You got cameras. Inside only. The outside ones were vandalized 2 weeks ago. I filed a report. He didn't write that down, just gave her a tired look and said, If they come back, call us. As the cruisers drove off, Amara stood alone on the sidewalk, glass crunching under her boots. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury. Across the street, a man watched from the shadows, his hands buried in his coat pockets. Walter had arrived just a minute too late. Miles's voice echoed in his earpiece. You said no contact yet. I know what I said, Walter whispered, but I don't like sitting still when she's bleeding. The next morning, Amara stood inside her store, broom in hand, sweeping up shards of her front window. Kendra showed up with coffee and an attitude. You still think this isn't connected to Briggs? I know it is, Amara muttered. He threatened me last night. This is just the beginning. So what now? You gonna write a blog post? File a complaint with the city? You think anyone cares? Amara's eyes locked onto Kendra's. I care. Kendra softened. I know. But you need help. This is bigger than you. I don't want to drag anyone into this. You already have. Behind them, the store door chimed. A deliveryman stood there with a clipboard and a confused look. This for you? He handed over a large envelope. No return address. Inside, a deed to the lot next to her bookstore. Amara's mouth fell open.
What?
A sticky note attached simply read, "Leverage it well." Kendra looked like she might faint.
Wait, who would just give you this?
That lot is worth hundreds of thousands. Amara stared at the note, her brain buzzing. Walter. She didn't know how, but deep down, she knew. That night, Amara marched into Councilman Briggs's office without an appointment. His assistant protested. She didn't stop walking. Briggs looked up from his leather chair, startled. "Miss Fields, we don't have a meeting." "You don't own the lot," Amara said, throwing the deed on his desk. "I do." His smile faded.
Where did you get this?
"I don't answer to you." His eyes narrowed. "You've made an enemy, Miss Fields." "No," she said. "I've made a stand." Briggs slammed his hand on the desk.
Do you even understand the forces you're playing with?
"I don't care about forces. I care about this community." He stood, towering over her. "You think this scares me?" A new voice cut in from the doorway. "It should." Both turned. Walter stood there, no longer in his tattered coat, but in a tailored navy blue suit, clean-shaven, with a calm menace in his eyes. Briggs paled. "Who the hell are you?" Walter stepped in slowly, gaze never breaking. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies." Briggs tried to compose himself. "You can't just barge in here." "I can." And I did. "But don't worry, Councilman. I'm not here for small talk." Walter reached into his coat and placed a folder on the desk. Inside were emails, bank transfers, schematics. Evidence of a bribery scheme involving Briggs and the developers. Amara's eyes widened. "What is this?" Walter didn't look at her. "Insurance." Briggs was sweating now. "You're bluffing. You have no authority." Walter leaned in.
You really don't know who I am, do you?
Briggs looked confused, then nervous, then panicked. Walter stepped back and turned to Amara. "It's your move now." She picked up the folder and walked out without another word. In the car outside, Amara sat in silence, folder in hand. "You followed me," she said. "I protected you," Walter corrected softly. "Why?" Walter stared straight ahead. "Because you did it for me first. I didn't know who you were, and I still don't know if you would have helped if you had." She met his gaze. "That's the point."
It shouldn't matter.
There was a long silence. Finally she whispered,
So who are you?
Walter hesitated, then spoke quietly.
My name is Walter Reed.
CEO of Valiant Group, billionaire, decorated veteran.
And I spent the last 5 years hiding from the world.
Amara blinked.
Why?
Because I built an empire and lost sight of the people who made it matter. You reminded me. She took a breath, digesting it all.
Why me?
He turned to her. Because you saw me when no one else would. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of a newsroom office, a reporter named Lydia Chen stared at a leaked tip email on her screen. Anonymous source. Subject line, Councilman Briggs's Empire of Lies. Attached, the very folder Amara had held earlier. Lydia smirked.
Looks like South Shore's about to get interesting.
The article hit the internet like a lightning bolt. Exclusive. Councilman Briggs tied to massive land corruption scandal. By 9 a.m., every local news station was swarming City Hall. Reporters shouted into microphones, camera crews blocked the sidewalks, and Briggs's office looked like a fortress under siege. The story had spread beyond their neighborhood, and now South Shore was on the national radar. Amara sat on the worn couch in her bookstore, phone vibrating non-stop on the table. Her inbox was flooded. Community members, activists, journalists, even strangers thanking her, asking questions or offering to help. But her eyes kept going back to one number on her screen. Unknown caller. It rang again. She answered cautiously.
Hello? Ms.
Fields, this is Detective Harris, Internal Affairs. We'd like to speak with you today regarding your recent visit to Councilman Briggs's office. Amara's heart kicked up.
Am I in trouble?
Not at all. But we believe you may be a key witness. She hung up slowly, breath catching. From the top of the stairs, Walter watched her.
They're coming for him,
she said, not looking up. Walter stepped down. Not just him. There's a whole web behind Briggs. Developers, cops, real estate investors. They saw this neighborhood as a check they could cash. Amara's voice was sharp. And you knew this? I suspected it.
I've been gathering data for months, waiting for the right moment to act.
Why didn't you go public yourself? Walter looked tired suddenly. I have enemies. Ones who would have buried the truth just to spite me. But no one expected a woman with a bookstore to lead the charge. Her eyes met his. You used me. He didn't flinch. I trusted you. The air grew thick with tension. Amara exhaled. And now what? Walter's voice was low. Now we go deeper. If we want to break this system, we can't stop at Briggs. Hours later, Amara sat in a police interview room under harsh fluorescent lights. Detective Harris, a tall, no-nonsense black woman with braided hair and keen eyes, sat across from her, recorder on. I just want to make sure you're safe, Harris said.
People like Briggs don't go down quietly.
I'm not afraid of him, Amara said.
Good, but be afraid of what's next.
The people backing Briggs don't like their secrets exposed. She slid a photo across the table. It showed Briggs shaking hands with a familiar face. Harold Dunning, CEO of Dunning Urban Development. Amara's breath caught. Dunning was the man who'd once offered to buy her block at a party she catered 2 years ago. He'd laughed when she refused. She remembered his exact words. You'll come around when the rats take over. Amara leaned back, stomach turning. He's next. Meanwhile, in a sleek glass tower uptown, Harold Dunning stood at a window overlooking the city. His assistant barged in, pale and stammering. Sir, it's all over the news. Dunning scrolled through his phone. Briggs's name was all over the front pages. He got sloppy, he muttered. We clean this up, fast.
Should we call Mitchell?
Dunning gave a slow nod. Tell him to handle it. Discredit the girl. Silence the source. Outside his office, a man in a grey suit waited by the elevator, earpiece buzzing. Mitchell Kane. Former intelligence operative, now fixer for hire. That night, Walter was gone. No note, no text. Amara stood outside her bookstore, cold wind rushing through the shattered window still covered in plywood. She felt exposed again, vulnerable, like the city was watching her, waiting for her to flinch. A car pulled up, a sleek, dark sedan with tinted windows. She didn't recognize it, but instinct told her to back away. The driver stepped out, Mitchell Kane. He looked clean, corporate, but there was something predatory in his smile. Miss Fields, he called out. Mind if we talk? I do. He kept walking. It would be in your best interest.
You're making very powerful people nervous.
Amara crossed her arms.
They should be.
Mitchell chuckled. Cute. But let me be clear. Drop the case. Walk away.
Or things get messy. She stared him down. That a threat? A promise?
Suddenly headlights flared. A second car pulled up behind Mitchell's. Walter's. He stepped out, calm, collected. That's enough. Mitchell smirked. Ah, the ghost shows himself. Walter moved between them. If you touch her, or her shop, or anyone in this neighborhood, I'll burn every last one of your clients to the ground. Mitchell's expression changed just slightly. You're out of your league. Walter's voice was ice. Try me. Mitchell gave a mock salute and stepped back into his car. As he pulled away, Amara exhaled, hands trembling now that the adrenaline had faded. Walter turned to her. Are you okay? No, she said honestly. But I'm not done either. Later that night, they sat side by side in the bookstore, surrounded by boxes of donations and flyers for a town meeting Amara had planned. Walter looked around. You built all this by yourself? She nodded. This place is all I've ever had. He smiled faintly. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. She looked at him. Then why do I feel like I'm always one breath from falling apart? Because you care. And that's what makes you dangerous to them. Their eyes met. Neither of them said the word. But the tension between them was undeniable now, fueled by fear, purpose, and something deeper. Outside, in a car parked down the street, Mitchell Kane made a call. They're digging, deeper than I thought, a voice on the other end replied coldly. Then make her disappear. Mitchell paused, then lit a cigarette. No, let's see how brave the girl really is. The town meeting was standing room only. Rows of folding chairs had long since filled. People leaned against shelves, stood in the aisles. Some even crowded outside the windows, peering in. Amara adjusted the mic stand at the front of her bookstore, heart pounding as the buzz of conversation filled the air. This wasn't just a gathering anymore. This was a movement. The moment she stepped up to speak, the room quieted. I know some of you are scared, she began. I am too, but fear is how they've kept us quiet. It's how they've torn down homes, raised rents, and forced our neighbors out. That ends tonight. Applause erupted, but Amara raised her hand to settle the crowd. She glanced toward the back. Walter stood silently, his arms crossed, nodding in support. She continued, We're not here to riot. We're here to fight smart. We demand investigations. We push for accountability. We vote. And we show them that this community isn't for sale. More applause. But before she could say another word, a voice cut through the room. You say that like you've got some kind of leverage, Ms. Fields. All eyes turned toward the doorway. Harold Dunning, in a tailored navy blue suit, stepped into the room like he owned it. Flanked by two corporate-looking bodyguards, he wore a smug grin that made Amara's stomach turn. She stepped down, refusing to let him see her shake. You're not welcome here. I'm a taxpayer, he said, and I own half the block. That makes this my business. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dunning looked around, playing to the audience. You see, folks, this bookstore is cute. Really. But when push comes to shove, it's worth more as a high-rise than a place for poetry slams and protest signs. Someone from the back shouted, Get out! But Dunning didn't flinch. No, I want to hear from Ms. Fields. Tell me, Amara, do you even have a plan? Or are you just another loud voice that'll fade when the money gets real? Before Amara could respond, Walter stepped forward. She has more than a plan, he said. She has evidence. The room gasped. Dunning's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Walter walked slowly to the front, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. Signed contracts, email threads. Payments made to Councilman Briggs, funneled through shell companies traced back to you. We turned it over to Internal Affairs yesterday. Investigators are already building a case. Dunning's face twitched. This is defamation. It's truth, Walter replied calmly. And then he did something no one expected. He took the mic. My name is Walter Jennings. You might not know me, but you've probably read about me. Jennings Capital. Westbridge Holdings.
I stepped down last year to work on a project that mattered, and that brought me here. The room was stunned into silence. Amara stared at him, wide-eyed.
She had known he was smart, well-connected, mysterious. But not this. A billionaire. Walter went on. I kept my name hidden because I wanted to see who would act out of principle, not profit. Amara helped me when I was just a stranger in trouble. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't care. And that's why I chose this community. Gasps spread. Phones came out. People recorded every word. I'm putting $10 million into a community trust, Walter continued, to fight displacement, to preserve homes, to fund education and small businesses, all of it controlled by a board made up of you. Dunning's face turned red. You're bluffing. Walter stepped down, walking directly to him. Call my lawyer, or check the headlines tomorrow. And with that, Dunning turned on his heel and stormed out. Later that night, Amara stood on the rooftop of her building, looking out over the quiet neighborhood. The air felt electric, like something was shifting beneath the surface. Walter joined her, offering a cup of tea. You didn't have to do all that, she said softly. I did, he replied, because people like Dunning count on silence. They bank on fatigue. But not this time. She sipped the tea, eyes never leaving the skyline. You really were just sitting there on that bench that day, watching? Walter smiled. I was more than watching. I was hoping I'd find something worth believing in again. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Amara spoke again. I'm not used to someone backing me up. Usually it's me against everything. Well, Walter said, get used to not being alone. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Harris. Briggs flipped. He's giving up names. We're going to need you to testify. Amara exhaled, holding the phone tight. More's coming, she said. I know, Walter replied, and they stood side by side, knowing that the storm was just beginning. But so was something bigger than either of them had imagined. The courtroom was packed tighter than a Sunday revival. Reporters, community members, and city officials filled every pew and aisle, waiting for what had become the most anticipated public corruption case in recent memory. The buzz in the air was electric, as if everyone knew history was about to be made. Amara sat quietly at the witness table, her heart pounding. A week ago, she was running a bookstore and hosting poetry nights. Today, she was the key witness in a trial that could shake the city's political foundation. Across the aisle, Councilman Briggs looked pale, his usual smug confidence replaced with the wide-eyed fear of a man who finally understood he was cornered. The district attorney, a young Latina named Elena Cruz, approached the bench. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Amara Fields to the stand. She rose, steady but composed, walking past the jurors, most of whom watched her with a mix of admiration and disbelief. Amara raised her right hand, swore the oath, sat. Ms. Fields, Eleanor began, can you tell the court what prompted you to contact Internal Affairs? Amara looked at Briggs before turning back to the jury. I noticed unusual traffic around certain properties in my neighborhood. Properties tied to real estate companies connected to Councilman Briggs. I started digging. What I found wasn't just shady, it was criminal. And how did you get access to these documents? She hesitated, then nodded toward the back of the courtroom. Walter sat in the gallery, hands folded, his expression unreadable. I had help, Amara said, from someone who believed the truth should come out, no matter the cost. Elena smiled.
We'll get to that. Let's focus on the night you confronted Harold Dunning. Flashback. Amara sat in the back of Walter's car, her laptop open, scanning files they had decrypted the night before. Her eyes widened.
Walter, she whispered, this isn't just bribery. They've been laundering money through a fake non-profit.
Walter leaned over, reading the screen. That's your smoking gun. She looked at him. We need to get this to the authorities now. And that's exactly what they did. Back in court, Eleanor presented copies of the documents. Paper trails, transfers, even emails where Briggs referred to backdoor bonuses for zoning approvals. When the defense lawyer tried to object, the judge barely looked up. Overruled. The court is very interested in this testimony. As the morning wore on, Briggs began to sweat. He whispered urgently to his attorney, who whispered back even more frantically. Suddenly, the judge's clerk handed over a note. The judge opened it, eyes scanning. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we've just been informed the defendant has agreed to cooperate with federal authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. The court will reconvene tomorrow with testimony that will implicate other city officials. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, reporters scrambling out to break the story. Amara sat frozen. Then, slowly, she smiled. Briggs was going down, and he wasn't going alone. That night, Amara and Walter sat at her kitchen table. Tea between them. Silence. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Better than okay? I didn't think it would happen so fast. Walter leaned back. You broke a dam. Everything's rushing out now. She looked at him. You knew this would happen. That's why you helped me. I helped, he said, because I saw someone who wouldn't stop, even when it was dangerous. That's rare. They sat in silence again until Walter finally spoke. I have to tell you something, he said. You deserve to know all of it. Amara's heart skipped. He reached into his coat and pulled out a letter, an official-looking document. She opened it. It was a property deed, not just for her building, but for 3 blocks of historically black-owned businesses. I bought them anonymously months ago, Walter said, after I saw what was happening. I wanted to make sure they stayed in the community. Amara stared at him. You're giving this to me? To a trust, he clarified. You'll be on the board, along with others in the community. Her eyes welled with tears. Why would you do this? Because, he said softly, you saved me before you even knew who I was. And I'm not the only one who needed saving. The tension, the emotion, the weight of what they'd been through, it all came crashing down. She got up, walked around the table, and hugged him tightly. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. But in that silence, something shifted. Not just in their lives. In the city, in the system, and in the hearts of everyone who had doubted that justice could still be done. The sun filtered through the old stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Community Centre, casting muted colours across the rows of folding chairs. The building, which had long served as a haven for locals during tough times, was buzzing with life. City officials, non-profit leaders, small business owners, and dozens of neighborhood residents filled the room. But the center of attention was the woman standing at the podium, Amara Fields. She looked poised but restless. Her speech was in her hand, but she hadn't glanced at it once. 6 months ago, she began, this neighborhood was on the verge of collapse. Gentrification was swallowing everything. We were told it was progress, but it was theft, dressed up in policy. There were nods, murmurs of agreement. Today, we change that. She turned, gesturing to a large easel beside her. On it was the blueprint of a new community initiative, the Fields Foundation, a non-profit that would protect black-owned property, provide legal aid for tenant battles, and create youth development programs. "And I couldn't have done this alone," she continued. "There's someone here who believed in this before anyone else did." Even before I believed in myself. Walter rose from his seat slowly. The crowd turned to see him. Many still didn't know who he really was. A few recognized his face from headlines that had quietly begun circulating. Amara smiled at him, her eyes glistening. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Walter Harris, philanthropist, veteran, and the anonymous force behind saving 3 blocks of this community." Applause erupted. A few stood. Walter looked visibly uncomfortable, but accepted the moment with grace. Then a reporter near the back shouted, "Mr. Harris, why the secrecy? Why not come forward sooner?" Walter took the mic, glanced briefly at Amara, then answered plainly, "Because this wasn't about me. I was helped by a woman who didn't know my name, didn't know my past, didn't care about my bank account. She helped me because it was right. I wanted to give that same kind of help, quietly, without needing anything back." The crowd was hushed. "And I stayed silent," he added, "because I was tired of being praised for doing what should be normal. For once, I wanted the spotlight to fall on people who fight for their communities every single day." More applause. This time it was a standing ovation. But the high was short-lived. Minutes after the presentation ended, Amara stepped into a side hallway to answer her buzzing phone. It was Elena Cruz. "We have a problem," Eleanor said immediately. "Briggs isn't taking the plea deal quietly. He's claiming the documents were planted, and he's accusing you of conspiring with Walter Harris to defame him." Amara's breath caught. "What? That's a lie?" "He's filed a formal motion, claims you were part of a larger scheme to buy out the neighborhood for your own gain, with Walter's money." "That's insane," Amara said, voice rising. "It's a Hail Mary. He's desperate," Eleanor replied, "but he's also pulling some strings." "His lawyer is pushing for an emergency hearing, tomorrow." As Amara ended the call, she turned to find Walter standing there. He'd heard just enough to understand. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" she asked. "I hoped not, but I prepared in case it did." "How bad is it?" Walter exhaled slowly. "He's not trying to win. He's trying to dirty you enough that no one cares if he loses. It's not about justice. It's about ruining your name before you can use it to change things." Amara clenched her jaw. "Then we fight. But this time, I won't be walking into that courtroom as a witness. I'm walking in as someone with a voice, and I'm going to use it." Walter nodded. "Then I'll be right beside you." The next morning, the media swarmed the courthouse like flies. The twist in the case had reignited controversy, and rumors swirled about everything from corruption to collusion. Amara walked in wearing a sharp charcoal grey suit, chin high, shoulders back. Inside, the judge scanned the courtroom with visible irritation. "We are here to address the defendant's new claims of evidence tampering and alleged conspiracy." Briggs's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, the defendant believes Ms. Fields and Mr. Harris have a financial and personal relationship that undermines her credibility. We request that her prior testimony be disqualified." "Objection!" Eleanor cut in. "This is nothing more than a character assassination." "Overruled, for now," the judge said. "We will hear testimony." Amara took the stand again. This time she didn't wait for permission. "Your Honor, if I may speak directly," she said. The judge paused, then nodded. "I did not conspire with anyone. I did not plant documents. What I did was look out for my community when no one else would. I followed the paper trail. I asked the right questions, and I refused to be silent." And the reason Mr. Briggs is making these accusations is because for the first time, someone pulled back the curtain on how this city really works. She looked directly at Briggs. You used your position to enrich yourself while families were being evicted. I didn't do this for attention. I did it because I was tired of watching my people lose everything. A beat of silence. Then Walter stood. From the gallery, he handed Elena a folder. She walked it over to the judge. Inside were documents that showed Briggs had tried to wire money to a shell account overseas, just days before his arrest. Fresh evidence, Your Honor, Eleanor said. Straight from the FBI. Briggs's face drained of color, and just like that, the tables turned. The courtroom was electric. Judge Ramirez adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the newly submitted FBI evidence. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, encrypted communications between Councilman Briggs and a network of developers. Everything Amara and Walter had suspected was now irrefutably on the record. In light of this, the judge finally said, the court dismisses the defendant's motion and accepts the prosecution's motion to proceed directly to sentencing. Briggs exploded. This is a setup. You can't do this. That woman is working with a billionaire. This entire court is bought. But no one paid him any mind. Amara didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward as the gavel dropped, and Briggs was remanded into custody. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones were thrust in her face. How does it feel to bring down one of the most powerful councilmen in the city? Are you and Walter Harris in a relationship? Will you run for office now? She smiled but answered calmly. This was never about taking anyone down. It was about lifting my people up. And no, I'm not running for office. But I will be watching the people who are. Walter appeared by her side in a tailored navy blue suit, clean-shaven, with a quiet confidence that only deep struggle can sculpt. He leaned in. You're going to need security after this. I'll settle for a slice of peace, Amara replied. And maybe coffee that isn't made in a courthouse vending machine. They both laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. 3 weeks later, a crowd filled the gymnasium at Jefferson High School, the heart of the neighborhood once at risk of being gutted by gentrification. The Fields Foundation was launching its first initiative, a free legal clinic for tenants and small business owners. Amara stood at the podium again, this time flanked by a diverse group of attorneys, advocates, and volunteers, people who had once been afraid to speak up and now stood proudly behind her. She began, We've seen what silence costs us. We've seen what happens when we wait for someone else to fix things. But we also saw what can happen when one voice refuses to back down. She paused, locking eyes with a teenage girl in the front row. This foundation isn't just about saving homes. It's about saving belief. Belief that we belong here, that our voices matter, that justice doesn't come dressed in power suits, but in courage and community. Walter stepped up beside her and handed her a small envelope. Confused, she opened it. Inside was a deed to the old community center. The city had planned to sell it off, until Walter bought it anonymously through a non-profit. Amara blinked back tears. You did this? You did this, he said. I just made sure the doors stayed open. The applause was thunderous. But not everything was tied up in a neat bow. Briggs's conviction shook the city. Several other officials were being investigated. Some news outlets began labeling Amara as a community vigilante, while others hailed her as a hero. She received threats. But she also received letters from young women across the country saying they finally saw themselves in someone. At home, Amara sat on her worn but beloved porch swing. Walter joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. What's next? He asked. She smiled. I want to rest. Then I want to write. Maybe tell our story. He raised an eyebrow. You think people will believe it? They better, she said. Because the truth is, all it took was one moment, one stranger in need, and one decision to say,
I won't walk away. Walter looked out at the quiet street.
Funny how the biggest changes come from the smallest moments.
Amara nodded, her voice soft.
And how sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back.
This story reminds us that heroism isn't about grand gestures. It's about everyday choices. One act of kindness can change a life.
One voice can shift a system, and when we stand up, especially when it's hard, we create ripples that become waves. If this story moved you, helped you see the world differently, or just gave you hope, support our channel. Subscribe, share, and be part of a community that believes in justice, in truth, and in the power of storytelling to change lives. Together, let's amplify the voices that too often go unheard.